What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another brand new episode of Balisong Review. My name is Banzo. I'm a Balisong enthusiast and flipper on YouTube, and today we're doing a quick triple review on 3 knives from BaliX, which is a clone company, but there are 2 out of the 3 knives here that I think have some unique features that will set them apart than just rather some clone company. But we'll get into those in a second. For now, I just want to talk about, this is going to be kind of like a quick review of all 3 of these knives. I'm going to tell you some specifications, the price point, and how each of them flip, and which one I think is the best out of the 3, as well as giving them each their own individual score. So I think we should just go ahead and start off with what these are. These are all each clones made by BaliX, and they are titled with X after their name. For instance, this GA clone right here is called the GAX. This is based off of the Ryworks GA, and the design already is pretty much just copying right off of Ryworks' homework right here. This is the BBX, also known as the Bare Bones X, and is slightly more different. It has some other unique features that set it apart from the actual bare bones. And then last but not least, we have the ABX, which is actually a trainer based off of the BRS Alpha Beast, and it is very unique, and I want to talk about that later. I think we should start off with the most unoriginal of the 3, which is the GAX. The GAX is made by BaliX and is based off of the Ryworks GA, which is a very expensive, high-level grail knife, very limitedly produced by Ryworks. I have never flipped one myself, so if you were wanting to put that into perspective of how hard these are and how expensive these are to actually get genuinely, then there you go. I've never actually touched them, and nor have been close to be able to buy them, and they come extremely highly customized. This one, though, is not the case. It just has this bland kind of unmarked Tonto blade that does look pretty decent looks wise. It's very sharp and angular, and it looks very similar to the Tonto version of the GA. It looks pretty much identical, but there are no engravings that you would typically have on a genuine GA. And another thing that's also very similar to the design is the handles. They're also an exact copy. They feature a interesting milling pattern that kind of slowly fades into the center, which meshes it into just like a flat handle. So it looks interesting for sure, and there is some care going on with the milling, but the design is just ripped off from Ryworks. The bushings, all 3 of these knives, I believe, have been tuned by hand. This one in particular is also using a pinsless system to hold the handles open. This probably has a lower grade of titanium, but it is using channel constructed titanium handles for the handles. Next up, we're going to talk about the BBX, which is the Bare Bones X. It's based off of the V2 Bare Bones. I imagine it's based off of the Tie Bones because the handles of this one are actually channel constructed titanium handles, which is where some of the originality of these clones comes into. The genuine BRS titanium Bare Bones is sandwich constructed, while this one has channel construction on the handles. And you can see a giant speed channel throughout right here. And on the other side, you can see more continued jimping on the other side. I actually do like the design of these handles, and it does look slightly different from the bare bones, not too different, especially on the front fascia here. It looks pretty much 1-to-1 for a bare bones of nowadays. But I do like that he took the creative liberty to make this channel titanium. The blade also doesn't look like an exact copy. There's an extra swedge up top here that looks different, and overall the shape is definitely looks like someone tried to copy the V2 bare bones shape but didn't get it quite right. So it makes it a little bit more original in my opinion. Honestly, it looks more like a DCB Genesis to me. So yeah, it has a bit more of an original shape, I guess, but overall it does look like a bare bones clone. Like if you told me that this was a bare bones clone, I would obviously believe you. This also has, just like the bare bones, screwed Zen pins in there. So it is on Zen pins. This is also using bushings as well. And you'll see those original ideas starting to develop as we go into this thing right here, which is actually based on the Alpha Beast. This is the ABX. It's a trainer, and it's based on the Alpha Beast, except there are pretty much no similarities to the Alpha Beast. For one, the Alpha Beast trainer, it doesn't look anything like this. Also, for instance, the handles are channel constructed aluminum handles with titanium inserts right here. Normal ABs are actually sandwich constructed titanium, and they do have a channel constructed titanium Alpha Beast, but they're not made in aluminum. So this is a step in the right direction for a little bit more originality. Plus, the design of the handles, you can't really tell right now, but up close in the shots, does look different. It actually does look a little bit more original, and like they took an idea out of their own book this time. There still is, of course, the signature BRS chevrons on the fascias of the handles, but besides that, this doesn't look like an Alpha Beast. I mean, the silhouette and the shape of it does, but you know, it doesn't exactly look a whole lot like an Applebee's. And that's what I like. I like that these clone companies do take some time to, you know, be able to express some of their originality instead of just copying other companies' homeworks like some other ones do. This is also using bushings, but this is using press fit Zen pins. So this one has been a little bit snappier in my opinion when flipping this, just a little bit more tactile. And honestly, this is way lighter. I forgot to mention the price point of the BBX. This is actually going for $109 plus shipping, and the ABX is actually a deal at $55 plus shipping for channel constructed aluminum with titanium inserts on them, bushings, and a well-balanced trainer. I feel like that's actually a really good deal. That's actually less expensive than an Orion, which I run pretty much daily. So I think this is a pretty good deal. So yeah, I think it's now time to flip each one of these, share my thoughts on each and one of them, and then give them individual scores. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so that was the knives flipped, but now it's time to give each of them their own individual scores and opinions. And I want to start off with the same order, which is with the GAX. The GAX is very weird to flip. It is very heavy despite the channel constructed titanium handles. I can only assume because there's no speed channel and because they're full channel and because of how thick these handles are, it's just because of how the design of this thing and how heavy it is. It literally is probably the heaviest knife I've tried in a while. It really feels like that. It really feels like you're flipping a hunk of metal in your hands. Not that it is super bad balance-wise. I think the balance of this is actually fairly neutral and honestly really comfortable. I don't mind it at all. I feel like it's a pretty decent balance between blade bias and handle bias. This is the balance point right about here. It does have a little bit of handle weight, but it's comfortable enough for me to like it, as I'm kind of like an old head when it comes to my balance preference. This knife feels like a boat when you flip it, and I can't really get behind that, so I don't really flip this one that often compared to the others, but I do like its balance. It's fairly neutral, but with like that old school kind of handle bias feel. So for now, I think I'm just going to give this a solid 6. I like it because it looks like a GA. I like it because the balance isn't super terrible, but it just feels weird to flip. The tolerances are great, which is why it's past 5, but hey, if it doesn't flip that great, I'm not going to score it too high. Next up, I want to talk about the BBX, which I actually don't hate at all. Like, I think this thing is actually pretty good. I like the balance. It feels more new age and more refreshing. It definitely is more blade biased than neutral for sure. I would think it's actually a little bit too blade biased in my opinion, which is kind of a downfall because the blade feels very heavy when you're flipping this knife, especially because the channel constructed titanium handles have a lot of holes in them and they're actually kind of thin. Like, I would say they're Medusa thin, and I don't necessarily mind that when I'm flipping a Medusa, but this feels more blade biased than a Medusa, so I can't really jive with it a whole lot. I think this knife does fans well. It does certain tricks really well, and I feel like it's a little bit more addicting to flip than the GAX, so I'm going to give it like a 6.8. That's what I'm feeling. Besides that, though, I actually don't mind the kind of creative choices they took. And actually, you know what? Now I'm going to say that. I'm going to bump this up to a 7. I'm going to bump this up to a 7. And that's where it's going to stay. I feel like there are a lot of things great about this. The tolerances aren't that awesome. I feel like those could be fixed. Probably just needs a retune. The balance needs to be changed slightly so that's a little bit less blade heavy, which is starting to be on the territory of. And maybe make the handles a little bit thicker. It would just be easier for all tricks throughout. I think it's decent though. I think it's definitely better than the GAX. Last but not least, let's move on to the ABX, which in my opinion is the best of the three. Not just because it's a trainer, but also because it has consistent tolerances. There's no tap, very little play, and it feels very smooth. Smoother than the GAX in my opinion. And it's very light. This thing weighs 3.9 ounces. And you can really feel that. It feels a lot more nimble. It feels a lot more contoured to my hand, especially since the handles are rounder than both the GAX and the BBX. This also has a nice grip on the handles despite it being aluminum. The anodization isn't super slippy like something you would see on like a Kraken or a Revo Nexus or something like that. This also has a lot of jimping that's very thick and exaggerated. Like, look on this handle. It literally looks like shredded cheese. It's crazy. It's actually really good for ladders. Sometimes though it feels a little bit like big, a little bit large when you're doing ladders. At least for me it does. It feels great though when you're doing every other trick. It has a very neutral balance. I would say it's only very slightly blade biased, but that's probably because of the aluminum handles. With the titanium integrated into it, I think it's a really nice accent and homage to the titanium knife that it was based on. But everything else about this knife is actually really nice. The tolerances are consistent. The weight is good. It's just on the edge of 4 ounces, which is kind of my territory. It flips smooth and has a pretty neutral balance. Overall, this gets a 7.5 for me. I actually really like it. If they kept going in the direction of this kind of originality, I would really like BaliX. But I don't really know how many of these are going to be made, but these are selling for $55 over on BaliX's Instagram, which I will link in the description down below. Anyways, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.